Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to our channel Stars with HK. I'm Humayun Kamran, and in today's session, we are honored to welcome our special guest, Michael M Muller, who's the co-founder of the International Behavior Analysis Organization. As the co-founder of the organization, he will provide valuable insights into the upcoming changes set to take effect in October 2025. This session will focus on the implications of these changes, how they might impact the professionals in the industry, and what steps they can take to prepare themselves. We look forward to an impactful and insightful session with Michael. We'll keep bringing you more helpful videos and sessions, so do consider to subscribe our YouTube channel and hit the notification bell so that you get the timely information about our latest content. Thank you very much, Michael, for joining us today, and welcome to our channel once again.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me back. I received a lot of good feedback from the last time, so I think you have broad reach and respect. So I appreciate the opportunity to provide some information, to clarify information, to answer questions about the upcoming changes in October 2025, and really anything else that people are curious about that I can help out with. So I can maybe just describe some of the changes and the reasons behind them, or would you like to?
Yeah, I think before we jump into the detailed discussion and my questions and the questions from some of the professionals as well as some of the future ABA therapists, I think if you can just highlight the main three changes in the policy that will be effective after October 2025, that will be great. And then we'll jump into the questions.
Yeah, that sounds good. It's helpful to keep in mind that when we founded the organization in 2020, so the kind of halfway through 2020 into 2021, we created what are now the requirements and the standards for the certification. At that time, we considered many different things, multiple certifications, different certifications than we have now, different requirements. The requirements are the current requirements are based on an understanding of why it was so difficult to obtain certifications in ABA prior to us getting involved. Outside of the United States, there's about 2.5% of the certifications relative to the United States. That's the distinction. I think in 2023 there were 275,000 people certified in ABA. About 8,000 of those were international. So it's just a massive discrepancy. And so we tried to understand why there was such a discrepancy and tried to address those obstacles and barriers when we created our requirements. We created some of those with the full intention of making changes to those requirements over time as the community could tolerate increasing restrictions, and as some of the existing policies had kind of passed their prime, so to speak. So one of those, and the first change that's coming in October, will be to increase the practice hours for IBA candidates from the existing 1,000 hours of practice and 50 hours of supervision to 1,500 hours of practice and 75 hours of supervision. The reason, it might be helpful also to know, what was the rationale to set the practice hours initially at 1,000. Our goal was to try to bring as many people into the IBAO family as possible. Those who have legitimately demonstrated that they have that they're good behavior analysts. And there's an interesting finding outside of the United States, is that there's a higher proportion of master's level BC ABAs outside the United States than, relatively speaking, inside the United States. And a leading cause of that was the fact that a lot of master's degrees outside the United States were not accepted by the BACB. So you have people with different fields of specialization that were not accepted. So they had to essentially resort to getting the bachelor's level BACB certification, which is the BC ABA. So you have a lot of master's level BC ABAs that were outside of the US. We wanted essentially to try to acknowledge what they've done and bring them into the fold without the expectation of additional requirements. So we set the initial requirements for the IBA at a point where that group could be moved in with, again, without additional coursework, without additional requirements, et cetera. And now that we've had enough time to allow those who want to do that, we can now kind of move the wheel forward a little bit and increase the number of practice hours that to a level that is more commensurate with just kind of a master's level certification expectation. So that's the reason why the initial requirements were set at the level that they were, and it's also the reason why we can comfortably move it forward and give enough time to prepare, which is a little bit more than 6 months.
Okay. And the second change?
The second change, and really it kind of piggybacks on that, is that we had previously allowed BC ABAs with the year of experience to add the IBA. And we allowed anybody with the QASPS who took a 90-hour bridge course to also add the IBA without doing any additional requirements. But now that our revision requirements are higher and the educational requirements are higher, we're not going to make the same consideration for those people who have both the lack of alignment with education and the required supervision and practice hours. So October 1, if someone has a BCABA or a QASPS, even if they do a 90-hour additional coursework, they will not be able to simply add the IBA. They can still obtain it through taking the exam, but they can't just go and be treated as equivalent.
Fair enough. And the third one?
The third one is that the QABA certifications will not be used for additions. Meaning if you have the QBA, you will not simply be allowed to add the IBA. And if you have the ABAT or ABAT, you will not simply be allowed to add the IBT. The reason that we had the option of an addition, where if you have one certification, you can add ours without any more requirements, excuse me, was really twofold. One, the main consideration or the main group was really those who had BACB certifications living outside of the US. Those initials after someone's name are very powerful and they're very widely recognized. Anybody in the field or associated with the field recognizes those. We wanted to try to capture as many BCBAs living outside the US and associate the IBA and the BCBA together to help promote and educate people about the new certification initials. From the point where they stopped providing, or the BACB stopped providing certifications outside of North America, there will be, and there already has been, a big shift into, if you're being certified in ABA, you're being certified by a different organization. The BACB certifications are still very recognizable. And we want people to see those who are certified behavior analysts with our initials so that ours become associated with certification in ABA. So that the main consideration was that particular group. We wanted to be inclusive, so that if there was another one that we considered, roughly equivalent, we could include those as well. What's happening now, however, and some of these reports are from our advisory board members in Pakistan, but what's happening now sometimes is that people are seeking the ABAT certification because it's easier to obtain, knowing that they can then add our certification without the additional requirements.
Mm.
The initial idea, this kind of introductory grandfathering period of allowing a similar certification to obtain ours, has now kind of moved into something else. So this is happening not with people who have existing certifications as sort of this startup policy, but people are now making a decision to get the easier one and to add the more difficult one. And the IBT is more difficult to achieve than the ABAT. There's more requirements and it's more time consuming. We have live skills testing. We have pre-certification CEU requirements and post-certification CEU requirements. We have 300 hours of practice and 10 hours of supervision, and then you have to pass the exam. So it's a more rigorous certification at the technician level, therapist level, and that was by design. Again, the considerations of what led to those additional requirements were that the international community does not have to follow the path of the US market. A lot of the considerations for what's guiding ABA in the US is dictated by the US healthcare system. It's not what is best for ABA. It's not necessarily what is best for clients or children. It's based on a payment arrangement through US healthcare company. And we don't have to do that. When we were creating the requirements, we asked ourselves, what does the international community need? What would be better? What would make the people in that role better trained? And a practice requirement, a live testing requirement, and additional professional development and ongoing professional development. So because these two are, for the first couple of years of us getting started, we were trying to allow as many people to join as possible. The two certifications are different. Ours is a little more rigorous, and so the time to allow equivalency has ended. IBAO will still allow QBAs to supervise our candidates and IBTs, but the time period where you can just make a straight swap and we will kind of cancel out or make exceptions for all the requirements is ending.
Thank you very much for the explanation and the three changes that will be going to be effective after October 2025. Let's come to later part, that is clarifying things from our angle and the questions from some of the professionals as well. The first one is, as you said, recent changes in about the practice hours from 1,000 to 1,500 and the supervisions from 50 to 75 hours. Can we say that these changes are because you are aiming at addressing some of the gaps in practitioners' practices or preparedness, or is it something else?
That's a good question. I don't think there's any way to gauge whether or not there are gaps. And if there are, whether or not those would be caused by the duration of supervision. I've been in this field for a while and I've been part of the changes that have occurred over time, and I've never seen any quantifiable data that suggest, for example, 1,400 hours of supervision is better or worse than 1,500 hours of supervision, or that 2,000 hours of supervision. I think the quality of the experience depends largely on your supervisor and the variety of activities that you're doing during your supervision time. If someone's doing the same thing over and over and over again, I don't know that it matters if you're doing 1,000 hours or 2,000 hours.
Mm,
I've never seen any. I think, first of all, it'd be very, very hard to kind of pinpoint that particular independent variable with practitioner outcomes because you have the effects of the ABA training itself. Yeah, I think you have the effects of the variety of experience. I think you have the effects of supervisor qualifications, maybe supervisor length of time in the field. There's a lot that goes on to what makes someone a good practitioner.
mm,
Um, so ours were not based on a sense that the quality of the behavior analyst is lacking and we need to do something to improve it. We've never received that feedback. We don't have any objective data suggesting that. Everybody seems to be quite happy with with the type of behavior analysts that are being created. Ours was really, like I said, a consideration that we had an introductory time period where a very special group of behavior analysts needed to be recognized and brought into the fold. And now we can move the standards closer to what is commonplace for master's level behavior analysts. Some registries in different countries also have, say, 1,500 hours. And so that's kind of the common expectation. We were very cognizant that our 1,000 was low compared to that, and again knew that we would adjust it forward at some point, and the time's right.
mm. And how do you respond to that candidates who feel that these changes might make certifications more difficult and financially burdensome as well?
Um, yeah, those are probably accurate. Those are probably accurate statements. It depends on where someone gets the cost, depends on where someone gets supervision.
Mm,
Largely, I think the model is if someone is working at a place that has IBAs, the supervision comes uh, as a part of their work. If someone is not and they have to go outside, then there is an additional cost to that. IBAO does not control that. We have put out information and we've asked people to be aware of that cost and to try to make it as affordable as possible. Um, we have also put out that the mentorship requirement, that's a first certification cycle requirement for IBAs. The expectation for that is that that service is free as a way to bring up the next level of behavior analysts so that they can do the same in this we kind of a pay it forward model. But in the case that someone has to pay for hourly supervision, um, they're going to be paying for 25 additional hours. So if that's the case, it would be an extra charge. We do allow group supervision for some of those, and that was expressly a cost consideration. So if there are people who need uh, some additional hours, the cost can be spread amongst groups of 5.
mm,
Um,
mm,
and people can have more than one supervisor. So it's possible that someone or a small group of people could have a supervisor to make up some of those hours in a more cost efficient way, and then have someone else who's supervising individually. Um, but it is a possibility. So that's reality.
yeah,
And the second part was what was it? The second part makes it a little
more
more.
difficult. Yeah, the certification. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true. Any increase in anything will make it more difficult. But we knew again when we started that we needed to get to this place eventually, and that the requirements were temporary. And this is really more in line with the standards that have been set previously. So
Mm.
now that we're a couple years after the BACB deadline and about 4 years after we've had all of our requirements together, the time was right to move it forward a little bit. Now, let me just say this too, that the October 1st deadline is important because if someone registers with our organization before that, they are going to be held to the current standard that we have right now.
Okay.
So if someone in July registers with IBAO to be an IBA candidate, they will be held to the 1,050. Anything between now and October 1st, we're going to honor the system that we have in place right now. After October 1st, there's a new system that begins. So I could see how someone, a day later that has, 500 additional hours might feel a particular way about that, but there has to be a deadline, and we have to also simultaneously honor the requirements that we have in place. That's why we have given a 6 month plus
Mm.
rollout. The IBAO structure is different than the BACB structure. The BACB wanted and has in place, if you're going to get certified, you get the education, you get all the supervision, you study, you do all these things. When you're ready to take the exam, then you apply to take the exam. So that's you join or attempt to join their organization at the end of the process, immediately prior to the exam. The IBAO process is the opposite. We want people to register and then get their education so that when they're getting supervision, when they're getting their hours, when they're meeting the requirements, all of that is uploaded into their online dashboard.
Mm.
And then when they're ready to take the exam, they take it through the dashboard. So anybody at any point can register. They can register day one of classes. They can register before classes start. They can register halfway through classes. You do not have to have had met any of the requirements before you register. Registration should be first.
Okay. Okay. Fine. Okay, one question I have is by removing BCABA and QASPS, as you said, for IBA edition, you have a sort of signals regarding the rigor of these programs. Is it right to say that the organization now think that the 90-hour ABA bridge course that was offered previously is no longer sufficient for BCABA or QASPS holders to qualify for the IBA certifications uh, after October 2025?
Those certifications differ, not just in the amount of hours of ABA education, but also experience, supervision, etc. We, for a temporary period of time, said this is close enough and this is close enough.
Mm.
So let's bring you in. But after the increase, too much is too far apart to consider it equivalent. One of the things that was contemplated was, does IBAO need a three-tier system? You
Mm.
have the BACB, you have the RBT, you have the BCABA, you have the BCBA, you have the BCBAD. Do we need a system that has more, um, different, more distinct levels? The IBA can be obtained with a bachelor's degree. So
Mm.
to have a separate bachelor's degree level certification would have been redundant. And so that we don't have three. And so to have the middle one be distinctly different, and treated as the same, I think is problematic, and it doesn't respect the additional requirements that have been met by the people who had the more difficult certification.
Mm. Mm. One thing, will IBAO consider a new bridge program to the affected BCABAs and QASPS candidates? Should we expect that as well, or no?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to remember that this distinction, the change, only affects their ability to obtain our certifications without doing anything else or without taking the exam. And that's really the main consideration is they were able to skip the exam, um, which is uh, a significant consideration. Um, if the ABA education is different, the supervision hours are different, and they took a different exam, it's just too much to say you can come in without doing anything else. So if there's a BCABA after October 1st, if there's a QASBS after October 1st, and they meet the other requirements, if they take a 90-hour bridge course, we would accept their QASBS or BCABA coursework plus the bridge course together as meeting our educational requirement. They would have to have some additional supervision hours, and then they can take the exam. So it's not that if you have those certifications, you can't enter into the IBAO system. You just can't do it kind of even swap because now there's too much separation between the requirements.
But can you make some changes in the bridge course for those BCBAs and QASPS candidates? Should we expect that in future, or nothing is like that is in consideration?
Well, there are two, well, I should say at least two. There's that I know about.
Okay.
Um, there's the Noble Grande in Nigeria.
Mhm.
Um, she offers a 90-hour bridge course. An Optimus Education offers a 90-hour bridge course. And so those are valuable courses if somebody wants to go from the BCABA after October 1st or the QASBA after October 1st to meet the educational requirements. They would also need to get additional supervision hours if they can't demonstrate that they've had the number that we require.
Mm.
And some people have. Some people have had ongoing supervision. Some people have 2,000 hours, 2,500 hours. And if they have that, so if you can demonstrate that you have the educational requirements, you've had the additional supervision and practice hours, then we'll let you sit for the exam. So we're still going to be flexible, but we have to recognize that those two certifications are now too different to just allow someone to come in as equivalent. So we
Mm.
will definitely, continue to try to work with people who want to meet the requirements. Um, but those are the changes after October 1st. Until
Okay.
then, the current system that's in place remains in place.
Okay. Is this something connected to the competitive rivalry between different boards, or it's something that IBAO is moving towards exclusivity type of thing? How do you respond to that?
The honest consideration is probably a little bit of both. Um, we have, like I said, we allow QBAs and BCBAs to supervise our candidates and our IBTs. The QBA does not allow IBAs to supervise their candidates or whatever they call that. They're people who are going through training. Um,
Hmm.
so, we have and continue up until October 1st to allow their certifications to be treated as equivalent. They don't do that. They had a period of time where they allowed anybody with the BCBA to obtain the QBA. That also was kind of an introductory period when they first started. Um, so it's not uncommon to allow flexibility with respect to waiving some requirements if it's sort of close enough, and then tightening that up and changing it. Um, So I mean, the BACB did this with the US state level certifications for a certain period of time. QABA did this with the BACB certifications for a certain period of time. So we're ending the equivalency type thing, but we're still allowing somebody from their board to supervise our people. And the consideration there is not to, kind of hold their certifications up in some way. It's to make the training process and the supervision process as accessible as possible for those who want to seek our certifications.
Mm.
We want to continue to make as many possibilities available. Again, 10 years from now, will we do this? I'm not really sure. If there are enough IBAs around the world that people don't have a difficult time finding an IBA supervisor, that kind of change could happen. We don't have any set plans on that. So we're
Mm.
still willing to, interact with them. So it's not competitive in the sense like we don't want anything to do with them. We want our candidates to have as many choices as possible. Their behavior analysts can certify ours, but at some point you have to draw a line and say the requirements are different. They can't be equivalent. In the case of the ABAT, their therapist level, like I said, their requirements are quite a bit lower. Um, and the opportunity that we created was not for someone 4 years later to make a decision, let me do the easier one and then add the more difficult one. It was something in place to honor those who already had an existing certification to add ours.
Mm.
So now I think we're past that, and we don't want to we don't want to have a lot of people obtain our certifications by taking an easier route and then adding ours. So
Mm.
it needs to stand alone.
Okay. Some professionals see these changes in their consideration. They see that these changes are unnecessary and is not strengthening the field, rather than rather limiting the opportunities for newcomers. And do you expect a drop in the number of candidates with these stricter policies? And if so, would there be any revision on the policies?
Um, you know, no, I don't expect to drop. I would be surprised if there was. The the changes are uh, are a little more difficult because they're a little more time consuming. Um, but almost anybody who has another certification also had the same level of requirements to meet. Um, Anybody from 2006 to 2023 had to do 1,500 hours of supervised practice.
Hmm.
So it's been around for a long time. Our consideration for making it less than that, like I said, was to include a group essentially of master's level BCABAs who are just kind of a special circumstance. But no, I don't think, it's if we had increased it arbitrarily to some really high number, if we said, okay, 3,500, I would expect a lot of people to say, where does that come from? What is it based on?
Hmm.
Because that would be quite a bit different than anything else that's out there. Um, the training standards that have been in the field of ABA have been 1,500 hours for a really long time. The BACB now has 2,000 hours. That might have been justification in and of itself to bump it up. Um, I don't, we don't have plans to do that again. But after meetings with the professional advisory board, there weren't any opinions that going from 1,000 to 1,500 was an unreasonable increase. And I think there was probably consensus that it brings us and it brings the IBA requirements more in line with the historical requirements of that level of certification.
Hmm.
Um, Some of these changes, we by not allowing the additions, we're creating fewer certification options for ourselves. But it is we feel necessary and worth that so that we can and these certifications can stand on their own. That should not be looked at as the certification that you simply add after you do the easier one. And unfortunately, in some spaces, that's what it is. We want people to make an informed choice. Um, our requirements are not based on U.S. healthcare or insurance policies, billing practices in the U.S. It's based on what we felt was a better set of requirements and standards to make the technician level position stronger.
Hmm. Okay, I have a couple of questions left. One is QABA focuses on autism specific certifications, for example, QA SPS, while IBAO emphasizes broader ABA practices. So, is there any consideration in this shift of policies to rejection of niche certification to somewhat, you can say, promote a generalized practice?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I was sort of debating on whether to talk about this particular aspect, but it's interesting, and I'll share it with you and your community of listeners and viewers. I mentioned this before, but when we were really creating what the certification should be or not be, there was pretty strong discussion on either side about having, for instance, an autism specific behavior analysis certification. Um, it's easy to imagine the debate, but some people were saying, no, 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 I don't work with kids with autism. And then the other part was saying, but 80%, relatively speaking, maybe more than that internationally, does work with that population. So are we going to create a general one or a specific one? Um, and at the time, it was really interesting because we had different considerations. We considered and sort of debated the idea of having a level, IBA level 1, IBA level 2, IBA level 3, that came with experience and additional requirements going forward. We lived with these ideas and kind of debated them the way that you might choose a baby name or something like that. The other one that I personally found the most interesting was to have a broad IBA type certification and just for basic applied behavior analysis, and then have additional more focused certifications that could be added on to that. There's a really really interesting thing that happens in the ABA community. Everybody gets a very general education. That's not to diminish it. It's important, but it's not focused in OBM. It's not focused in feeding. It's not focused in hospitals. It's not focused on adults. It's not focused in schools. But you can get this general training and then go and do whatever you want, and you're automatically assumed to be an expert in those areas also. Where there's nothing in the BACB, QBA, IBA training about intellectual disabilities or how those are classified or diagnosed or developmental disabilities. There is a little bit of autism knowledge in the QBA, but it's very surface level. It's about what we have in the IBT. And so you have, literally thousands of people who they get a general ABA certification, and they are automatically considered experts in something they have never been formally instructed in. So the idea at the time was to have both additional training in a specialty area that you could use your generalized training to enter into more confidently. And it would also demonstrate a way to change your scope of practice or the setting in which you're practicing. Right now, generally speaking, if somebody wants, if somebody's been doing it early intervention with very young kids with autism, and now they want to go into pediatric feeding, or they want to work with an adult population in group homes, there's nothing else they have to do. They can simply go and do something else. The BACB recommends that you get additional training and consultation, but it's never really been defined. So changing scope of practice is something that is kind of a nebulous idea in our field. And just the more that our group has thought about this, the stranger it seems that you can work with the population or in a setting where you've really received no instruction. So we have begun the process. Well, at the time, it was just too much, honestly, to take on as a new organization. But now that we have a few years under our belt, the idea has never left, and we're beginning the process to create these kind of micro credentials where someone can specialize in an area or with the population after having received the more general ABA training. So to answer your question specifically, the changes on October 1st do not relate to that, but additional upcoming certification opportunities or certificate program opportunities will be made available that will allow people to add that on. So if you want to work with autism, you can do an autism specific training. If you want to work with intellectual disabilities, developmental disabilities, which a lot of people do, and they simply don't know. A lot of people don't know the differences between chromosomal disorders, genetic disorders, how these things happen, why they happen, the differences in how you might approach treatment, behavioral treatment with someone from one population or the next. And they're important considerations that it just simply kind of gets glossed over in this general ABA training. What you do in group homes or with adults is different than what you do in elementary schools. And you can certainly go in and sort of figure this out on the job, or you can hopefully receive, this kind of specialized training and then go in a more well-informed manner. That's something that's on the horizon for us.
Right. From all the discussion that we have, there is one feeling that all the boards are getting some distance from each other. So, are there any plans as far as IBAO is concerned that collaboration with the BACB or QABA or other international ABA organizations, or IBAO is planning sort of complete independent sort of thing? Are you planning or heading towards that?
All of the organizations are completely independent. Any association is purely coincidental. We've never been approached by that. We don't have any plans to approach. I think we have this isn't like organizational level, but there are some people within the organizations that I think see that the BACB was the only certification body for a very, very long time. And although it was international, it was almost international in name only. They didn't have translated exams until 2015, and that was only 3 or 4. So their total period of time where they had translated exams, 2015 to 2019. The VCS requirements, the university requirements, a lot of it was just set up to be very, very difficult. Not intentionally. I don't believe it was an intentional move. They made their changes based on the U.S. market, where there's like I said, there's 275,000 people certified. That was the population that moved their requirements and moved the needle. And then they said that that they're out of the international certification game. Yet there are people within their organization that are going out and quote unquote providing assistance. But some of that has been very much against our organization and the QABA. The BACB is supporting people in their efforts to get national recognition and national licensure. at a ridiculously early period in the evolution of ABA in these particular countries.
Mm,
The only successful licensure attempts have been this model of certification to licensure. Never been accomplished in any other way.
mm,
Uh, Certifications allow someone to define the field. These are the requirements to be a behavior analyst here. These are the requirements of study, of education, of exam, knowledge, all these things, experiences. Um, if you didn't have a certification, you couldn't count the number of people that are certified. How do you define your field? It can't be by Facebook groups and it can't be by, surveys and these types of things. It can't be just by people who consider themselves a certain way. You have to have standards that have to be met. To skip that and lobby a government, which is time and money and influence, to say this tiny little group right here of undefined behavior analysts wants recognition as a new profession. It is a little ridiculous on its face because the majority of certainly psychology professional advisory boards consider ABA part of psychology.
right.
Really, the US, and not at a national level, it's state level. So it's the majority of states now, but it's still state by state, have been the
Mm,
only successful ones to say we are entirely different industry and field than psychology.
mhm.
Most of the world doesn't see it that way. Most of the world considers us part of psychology, and there's really, fantastic reasons why they might do that. Um,
Okay.
Take a handful of people and try to make the case that this small handful of people is needs a different board, different regulations, different
Mm,
national uh, regulatory oversight is an incredibly hard sell. So there could be ways that these organizations could work together to get a place to national licensure, but the efforts have not been made on either side.
mm. Okay. And one last thing, any last words from your end? And the last word from my end is from the professionals and from the future professionals in the field. When should we expect Michael in Pakistan?
Hopefully around this time next year, I have to get back with our group and the professional advisory board. Um, they're all excited, to have some trainings in their respective areas, and I think there's great reason to see various parts of the country. Uh, Frankly, it's been just a scheduling issue on my part. I'm overcommitted in 2025, but I would love to come, especially when the if the weather's a little cooler, um, and be able to see what I keep up to date online and I see a lot of the posts and things like that, and it seems like a very vibrant, growing community. I would love to support it and bring more attention to it. I think there's a lot happening there. We've been in contact with a couple of universities that are interested in becoming approved content providers to have master's level um, training at the university level in ABA, possibly a doctorate program interested. So those are things that I think, if they happen, it just really helps gain momentum and it brings awareness to what people are doing and the benefits of the field. So um, I would love to come. I'd love to be a part of it. I'd love to help to continue to support what they're doing there right now.
Okay, thank you very much, and good luck for the future endeavors. With that, we are at the end of our session. I would like to thank you once again for your time and support. And I hope that this information and clarifications will be very helpful for many professionals and future professionals as well. So, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks again for the opportunity. Hopefully, it provided some context for the changes, what the changes are, and what they're not, and just some good information. If anybody has any more, they can email IBAO info@theibao.com, and we'll help them out.
Okay. And thank you as well for watching, all of you, and hope to see you soon in our next session with another topic or another guest. Until then, take care and Allah Hafiz.